the front lines of California's fires. Evangelicals warm up to Trump.
Up until now, we really had no freedom of religion.
And capturing carbon to stop climate change. President Trump gave his first full press conference since February. During the roughly 40-minute presser with Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, Trump said his relationship with McConnell is better than ever, that he's not firing special counsel Robert Mueller, and once again lauded the federal government's response to the growing crisis in Puerto Rico, while blaming the island.
It was in very poor shape before the hurricanes ever hit. And we've delivered tremendous amounts of water. Then what you have to do is you have to have distribution of the water by the people on the island. We now actually have military distributing food, something that's really they shouldn't have to be doing.
Trump also said President Obama never called the families of fallen soldiers, but when asked how he knew that, he backtracked. Iraqi troops have seized the city of Kirkuk from Kurdish forces, as well as an oil refinery, a military base, and an airport, just days after the soldiers worked together to liberate the city of Hawija from ISIS. The operation came less than a month after Kurds voted overwhelmingly to declare independence from Iraq, and Prime Minister Haider al-Abadi said he was moving on Kirkuk in the name of national unity. Kirkuk isn't part of the autonomous Kurdish region, but it has a large Kurdish population that voted in the referendum. Somali officials say at least 300 people died in Mogadishu when a truck packed with explosives detonated outside a hotel. Hundreds more were wounded, and some are being flown to Turkey for treatment. The government says it's certain that al-Shabaab militants were behind the attack, the deadliest in the nation's history, but the terrorist group has not claimed responsibility. Army Sergeant Bo Bergdahl pled guilty to desertion and misbehavior before the enemy. In 2009, Bergdahl walked off his base in Afghanistan and was captured by the Taliban and held for 5 years. Bergdahl could get a life sentence for endangering the troops who went to search for him. He says he left his base to report leadership problems. His sentencing begins next week. Researchers discovered a weakness in the standard Wi-Fi security protocol called WPA2, and it could make almost every Wi-Fi connection vulnerable to hacking. The breach exploits the handshake that a Wi-Fi network and a device give to each other when a device wants to join, and grants a hacker access to nearly everything sent over the network. Microsoft says it's released a security update to address the issue, and Google says it'll do the same. This weekend, religious conservatives gathered in Washington for the annual Values Voter Summit, which is all about putting God back into politics.
Our God still reigns over the affairs of nations, doesn't he? He still reigns.
It's a voting bloc that hasn't always been too comfortable with Donald Trump and his own moral compass. Even as the summit was wrapping up, news broke that the Trump campaign had been subpoenaed for documents related to groping allegations leveled against him by at least 10 women.
He's not yet taken back his threat to sue me and the others who came forward.
So why are social conservatives happy to overlook that kind of accusation?
One nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This is America's heritage.
Donald Trump's a bit more fluent in the language of the religious right these days.
A country that never forgets that we are all, every one of us, made by the same God in heaven.
But values voters aren't completely buying it.
I know he's really, really busy, but going to church a little bit more.
I was wondering about that, yeah.
It's never a bad thing.
When social conservatives try to defend Trump's rhetoric, some of them still get tied up in knots.
What values voters try to do is strive to be better, whereas the left goes out and celebrates perversity and celebrates all kinds of bad stuff. We say, okay, we're going to try to do better.
Saying grab her by the pussy sort of celebrates perversity.
Well, but again...
Blatantly celebrates perversity.
Okay, but let's when you look at what the left does. Bill Clinton did these things. Hillary did these things. He simply said stuff.
But this crowd started with such low expectations for Trump that it didn't take much to exceed them.
When he was running, I was saying, oh dear God, nobody, I do not want him. No, please, I beg of you, no. Because he doesn't know when to close his happy little vocals. He's accomplishing a lot more. Like the other day he said,
we're saying Merry Christmas again.
That's huge for me because it's all about Christ.
With Trump, they feel like they're winning.
In America, we don't worship government, we worship God.
That doesn't make obvious sense, unless you appreciate that this movement feels persecuted by secular society.
Up until now, we really had no freedom of religion. It was being taken away a little bit at a time.
Did you personally feel like you weren't able to express your religion?
Well, every time you mentioned God in the wrong spots, it was frowned upon.
We are stopping cold the attacks on Judeo-Christian values.
And without Trump, they think things would be way worse.
That's the weird mentality that's going on with conservatives is unless he becomes Hillary, he gets a pass.
I guess I just wonder why it's still about Hillary.
Here's the reason why it's about Hillary, okay, is because we look outside and we see a bunch of people in masks beating up conservatives.
You're talking about Antifa?
Yeah, beating them up, getting away with it. That's what would be going on. Those people would be ruling us. I couldn't have a Trump sticker on my car, it would get keyed and the windows would get broken. If I wore a Trump hat in Massachusetts, I'd get spat on.
But Trump is president, and he's promised to go to war for them on everything.
We're taking a little different route than we had hoped because getting Congress, they forgot what their pledges were.
Which means that, regardless of his character, Trump's policies at least aren't a problem for the religious right. So now, their fight is with Congress.
I think he has done as much as he can through executive order. Congress has just been a disappointment for so long. You know, we gave the conservative side of the political arm the House of Representatives, we gave them the Senate, and we just saw very little action. And honestly, if there are Republican senators that are not willing to support the president's agenda, who are up for re-election, we don't care that they're Republican. They should be voted out.
The Iran deal was one of the worst and most one-sided transactions the United States has ever entered into. While the United States adheres to our commitment under the deal, the Iranian regime continues to fuel conflict, terror, and turmoil throughout the Middle East and beyond.
On Friday, President Trump pulled out of the Iran nuclear deal, except he didn't really. The announcement was long on swagger, but short on clarity. So we asked the nuclear nerds behind the Arms Control Wonk podcast to sort out what it means.
Friday was a total shit show. I mean, Trump gives this long, rambly speech about how much he hates the Iranians, but I think the more important thing is he refused to send this routine certification to Congress that says Iran is implementing its commitments.
What the decertification does is essentially has kicked it to Congress to decide if it wants to reimpose sanctions that were taken off as part of the implementation of the Iran nuclear agreement.
It doesn't blow up the nuclear deal, but what it does is it allows Congress to come back and put more sanctions on Iran, which may or may push the Iranians out of the deal.
So was the Iran nuclear agreement actually a bad deal? No. I mean, both you and I looked at the Iran nuclear deal when it came out, and we both thought it was a good deal.
So you get these two good things out of the deal. One is you get inspections so that you have some confidence that if the Iranians start to build a bomb, you'll know. But the other thing you get is you gave the Iranians a good deal. They actually have some incentive to not build a bomb. One thing that I think people don't understand is how quickly the Iranians could build a nuclear weapon if they wanted. If they wanted to, they could have a nuclear weapon sitting on a missile that could hit the United States by the end of Trump's first term. But under the terms of the deal, there is no bomb program, right? And there are limits on their energy program, much tighter limits than pretty much any other country labors under. So what you have now is a situation where they went from almost 20,000 centrifuges, which was a non-proliferation nightmare, down to about 5,000.
But let's talk about some of the allegations of Iranian non-compliance, because they're out there, but they're fucking wacky.
The Iranians have not been cheating as far as anyone knows. I mean, I think ultimately the problem is Iran is scary, right? And the people who don't like the deal, that's their argument, Iran is scary.
Right.
And so, unless you can give the supreme leader a colonoscopy and make sure there are no bombs up there, they're always gonna be like, well, have you looked everywhere? The central issue, or the central lesson of the nuclear age, is that you have to deal with countries you don't like. That countries that you hate can have the ability to destroy you.
We have to accept vulnerability, and I think that is the lesson that I take away from the Cold War.
This is almost the last possible moment not to fuck this up.
This morning, a contract firefighter died in Napa County. His truck rolled over the edge of a steep road as he rushed to get more water to battle the Nuns fire, one of 14 still raging in Northern California. It was the first death of a firefighter and the 41st death overall from wildfires that are among the worst in the state's history. In 8 days, they've burned more than 213,000 acres, destroyed close to 5,700 structures, and forced the evacuations of at least 40,000 people. 11,000 firefighters are still battling the deadly blazes. Vice News spent 27 hours with a crew working around the clock on the northern edge of the Nuns fire.
For us again. I know a lot of you are hurting, bleeding. It's been a long road. I really sincerely appreciate that effort. So just keep doing it, take care of your troops, and let's get back to it.
783, 92.7, Charlie, TAC 27. Came up in the house, I was driving by, checking the structures, noticed that there was actually fire on the deck. As I got close, I noticed there was fire on the deck and just starting to get up on the eaves of the structure. So I had requested the engine to come down to knock the fire out. Get a hose up here, get water, and we'll get it cut out. How long are you going? To save time and resources, we're able to come down and cut the smaller decks away from things and save that whole structure by taking out that fuel load that's right there, and it's easier for us to mop up instead of having to be right next to the structure. For right now, at this momentarily, we're doing good. Everybody here that's in the fire service, they do it because they want to help. It's a way of just giving back. That structure fire, we had a fire earlier where we came here, we started helping out, we got in the attic. We're looking at it, realizing that there was a lot more fire than what we was able to have resources for, so we kind of pulled everything out, hoping that the structure wouldn't burn down, but unfortunately it did. I'm looking at least we saved some of their people's stuff. I see a lot of the pictures that we saved. That's the emotional win there, maybe. So, we'll see. Flag's still up, though. Let that go. Dave, let that burn up a little bit. Then bump down over here and do the same thing. Give me a dot high, and then come down and give me a dot low. What we're doing is the fire's coming down. So what we're doing is trying to help get our crews going a little bit further now that fire intensity is kind of low. We're doing a little defensive firing and put a little fire on the ground to kind of consume the fuels up between the edge of the fire and where the house is at. So we can get our crews out of here a little quicker, get them down to the next house.
5772.
Yeah, just heads up, the winds up here are starting to push down canyon. supposed to be clearing fire line, and there was a tree right there that was causing a little bit of a heartache. So they were taking that out, worked their way. Crews holding up. My engine guys that I had up there, I stopped and talked to them a little bit, gave them some water, got them some food, checked how they're doing. The work that the crew did was good work. They worked hard. They worked long, all night long. It was a true hard 24-hour shift that they worked last night, and they did good work. I'm proud of them.
The Paris Climate Agreement was a major step forward in the fight against climate change. But experts say its goal of keeping temperature rise below 2 degrees will be impossible without physically removing CO2 from the atmosphere. Ariel Duhem-Ross went to Switzerland to see the world's most advanced carbon capture technology at work.
Okay, so right now it is currently sucking air into the machine.
It's going to capture your CO2. It's sort of a machine of artificial trees. We are actually copying what nature is doing, capturing and storing CO2.
In 2009, Christophe Gebald, along with his partner, co-founded a business called Climeworks. Christophe says they saw an opening in the market for businesses that tackle climate change.
Our dream is to be entrepreneurs.
So they set a goal to develop technology to extract carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Today, that idea has become reality, at least on a small scale. Here's how it all works. A truck drops off garbage at an incinerator plant. The heat from the plant powers Climeworks CO2 collectors, which are located above the plant. The collectors suck air into special filters that contain a compound that sticks to and traps carbon dioxide. After that, the carbon dioxide gets shuttled over to a local greenhouse, which would have otherwise had to buy carbon dioxide from a fossil fuel company. The CO2 helps plants grow, increasing the greenhouse's yield by up to 20%.
Once the air exits our system, it contains something like 50 to 90% less of CO2 compared to the air going into the system.
Does that mean that the air that I'm breathing in right now, because those machines are currently operating, has less carbon than maybe if I was, 100 miles that way?
Yes, indeed, that's the case.
Carbon capture technology has a long way to go. Right now, huge amounts of air need to be filtered through Climeworks collectors to extract small quantities of carbon dioxide. Every hour, the plant filters 72 Olympic swimming pools worth of air, and from that, it's only able to extract the equivalent of 2% of one swimming pool's worth of CO2.
In order to fix climate change, people currently assume that we need 10 gigatons of negative emissions per year. The vision we have is to capture 1% of global emissions by 2025. In order to achieve this goal, we need 300,000 of those.
To be clear, he means 300,000 facilities like this one, not individual collectors. To turn this into a viable business, making carbon capture technology more efficient will be crucial. Christophe says that the cost of extracting just 1 ton of CO2 with Climeworks technology is around $600, well above the roughly $200 that the greenhouse pays. The Swiss government picks up the rest of the tab.
So we're not making money with this plant, but it's an important reference project and for us, and we also feel for the planet to prove that this works.
The conditions that allow Climeworks to operate its technology in this way are narrow. Because Climeworks' CO2 collectors sit on top of a waste incineration plant, they have an easy, cheap source of heat and power. And selling the CO2 to a greenhouse means that the machines don't permanently remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. They merely recycle it. So, what scientists hope to do is implement a more permanent solution. Niall McDowell is a sustainable energy expert based in London. He's been studying this for years. Do we know what we're going to do with this carbon once it's removed from the atmosphere?
So my view is that we should put it deep underground, 2 or 3 miles below the surface of the Earth, where they will be stably held basically forever.
Is that safe?
Nature has been doing it for millions and millions of years.
What Niall is talking about is a type of carbon sequestration. Some scientists suggest that storing carbon dioxide underground is necessary to keep our world below a 2 degrees Celsius temperature increase. And when that technology is ready to be deployed around the world, Climeworks hopes its CO2 collectors will be central to this process. It's already working to make that happen. A geothermal power plant in Iceland recently announced that it will incorporate Climeworks technology to create the first negative emission power plant.
What Climeworks is doing, is that doing anything to mitigate climate change?
It's too small scale. But again, what they're doing is proving a technology or demonstrating a technology. And so, we wouldn't expect the first car to win Formula One today. Climeworks are sort of the pioneers of this technology, like Henry Ford was back in the day. So it's a very, very important first step.
On a very basic level, why should people care about Climeworks and what you guys are doing?
Because they need us.
Do you think that problem should be tackled by a private company as opposed to a government? Like, are you the people who should be doing this right now?
Well, I feel so, yes, because no one else is doing it. The government currently is not doing it, so someone has to do it.
That's Vice News Tonight for Monday, October 16th.